Hi everyone. In my previous video, the link is in the description section below. I talked about the advantages of doing a research project, a PhD funded by the industry. In today's video, I will talk about some of the things you have to be mindful of, or you can call them downsides or disadvantages of doing a PhD or a research project which has been backed by the industry. Once again, when I say research project, it could be a PhD, it could be a master's thesis, it could be a MPhil or honors thesis. And when I say industry funded, I mean it could be a private industry such as a media, journalism, or it could be a government funded initiative such as the defense industry, which is backed by the government. So what are the disadvantages of doing such a thesis? So before you start your thesis, be very clear as to why you are doing that thesis. Is that a PhD research project? You want that research to lead to a PhD degree or a master's degree or an honors degree. Now having very clear expectation of what you want from that research project is very important, because when you enter the research project, your supervisors who have drafted the whole research project will be very strict about you adhering or following to the requirements of the research project. They will ask you to focus on the research questions that they have designed, the research project that they have designed. You will not have the flexibility to deviate from it unless you are meeting the requirements or the expectations of the supervisors. So if you go into the research project and while studying you find another area of research that is fascinating to you and you want to change your research focus or change your research topic or even change your research question, sometimes your supervisors who are getting funding from the industry will not be happy because they want you to answer that research question that they have designed. They have probably spent months designing it and they are getting funding for it. The second problem is with the intellectual property. Sometimes after the completion of the research project, you may have an intellectual property in your hands. It could be a software, it could be a tool, it could be a framework, it could be something tangible like a medicine. Now, having the intellectual property very cleared out, or the rights to the intellectual property cleared out from the beginning of the research is very important, so that your expectations are not or you are not disappointed. So before signing the contract with the industry, before beginning the research project, you should ask your supervisors, you should ask the funding body as to who will own the intellectual property. Most of the cases, it is the funding body who owns the intellectual property because they are paying you. But you should be very clear about that. The third thing is that sometimes you may think that what you are doing is a PhD research or a master's research, whereas it could be a very targeted project towards answering a question that is bothering the industry. Now, just because you think that every research leads to a degree may not be the case in this case. Let's take the example of a PhD research. Now, let's say you are doing a project and the research question that you answer, the research gap that you have found, has answered the requirements of the industry. However, it may not be scholarly enough, or what a PhD wants from you is some novel contribution, some new contribution to theory. Your research output may not be making that unique contribution, that novel contribution, that new contribution to the theory, which is an essential requirement of a PhD research project. In that case, that research project which was successful for the industry will not translate into a PhD degree for you. The fourth problem is with regular updates. Now, when you have to provide regular updates to the industry, you write them in a certain format. Now, that format may not be very academic in nature. It could be in the form of a presentation, it could be in the form of a report. Now, that report does not have the same academic quality or academic rigor that a publication will have. In case you want those publications to become part of your research or thesis or project. Now, for those reports to become accepted as a publication or even as a chapter of your thesis, you need to get them peer reviewed. Getting them peer reviewed also has benefits for you presenting your data to the industry, because then you get to address the gaps which may be there that you have not observed, or you get to address the limitations of the research. You also get a couple of extra eyes who are unbiased and who peer review your work. but make sure that you do not confuse that the report that you write for industry will always be something that you can get accepted in a thesis or as a publication, because that requires different academic rigor. You may draw aspects from it, you may draw aspects from the industry project, you may draw findings of the data from it, but you have to write a thesis or a chapter of the thesis or a publication which satisfied the peer review requirements. Often in such cases the authorship also becomes important. So if the industry project report was written by a few people, people who are not part of the supervision team, or people who have led that project decide to become the lead author, then it is very important that when you use that text or you use that report as a publication for your thesis, the authorship requirement or the authorship details becomes very important. Now please find out the requirements in your university, but most of the universities require PhD candidates to be leading publications. They should be the one leading the publication that is going to be accepted as part of your thesis chapter. But this regarding the expectations of the authorship should be clear before you start writing the paper. So please have a discussion with your co-authors, because often what happens in interdisciplinary research or what happens in industry funded research is that you are part of an interdisciplinary research. So if you are part of an interdisciplinary research, you may be working with people from other areas who are also researching in similar area but different aspects of it. So the example I discussed in my previous video was that you might be investigating cognitive science behavior and somebody might be researching in neurology, anthropology, linguistics, statistics, psychology. Now depending on what area your research is, there could be other people who are making contributions to that paper or that report. In that case, make it very clear who the lead author is before you decide to take that paper and convert it into a publication to try and get it accepted towards your research studies. Alright, because thesis examination requirements, peer review process requires this to be very clear. Especially after at the end of your thesis project or your research project, you have submitted your thesis, but most of the publications that you have included have not been led by you or were written by somebody else, or somebody claims authorship over it, will put your thesis in kind of a dispute mode, which is not good for you, especially after many years of study. So make sure that the requirements for the thesis examination is very clear to you. You know exactly what you have to do, and keep it separate from the work that you are doing from the industry. Or if it is overlapping, then make sure that they are overlapping in a way which benefits your thesis requirements as well as addressing the industry requirements as well. Alright, in such cases you have to build some effective relationships. So your supervisors may have a focus on addressing the industry problem and not so much as on supervising your thesis study. So they may supervise you in a way that helps them to answer the industry question, the question for which they are getting funding from the industry, and that may not translate into a thesis requirement. So you have to make sure that you build effective relationships with people who can guide you in both the processes, in the process of you being able to answer the industry's question for which you are getting the funding, but also being able to write it like a report or a thesis chapter or a publication which gets accepted when your thesis is getting examined. Alright, sometimes in industry funded projects what also happens is that people get job offers before the research is completed because of the great work that they are doing, or the fact that they are finding things which may be very beneficial to the industry. Now if you are doing this research project to complete a PhD or a master's, then it is important that you don't get distracted. That would be my recommendation. Now of course, if your objective was to use this research study to get into the industry, which is often the case with postdoctoral researchers, you should not be doing that unless you have a degree that you can use in the future. So even if you get very lucrative offers from the industry, it is okay for you to go ahead and accept them, provided that you have made it very clear to the industry that your priority, your focus will be on completing the thesis project, on you getting that degree, whether it's a PhD, a doctorate or a master's degree, and then you continuing that employment. Do not get distracted because it may often happen that you may lose that job, you may complete that contract and not find anything else, or the industry might decide to go with a better researcher or somebody who is making more bigger strides in the same area of research. So having that degree will help you to find a job somewhere else as well. So I think I have pretty much talked about all the downsides of doing an industry funded project. Remember, there are upsides and downsides to everything in life, but you have to remember why you are going into an industry funded project. What is it that you want to get out of it? Whether it's a degree, whether it's a job, whether it's just meeting the industry requirements and you getting paid for it. Be very clear with your expectations, communicate the same to your supervisor so that you get the best outcome from this project. Good luck with your studies and with your work, and I will see you soon with my next video. Thank you for watching today's video. Subscribe, share, and bye for